Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, AI, Audit, Manage, and Analyze Threats, presented by ISACA's very own Safia Kazi. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Sophia.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited to be here today. I'm Safia Kazi. I'm the Privacy Professional Practices Principal at ISACA. So just kind of to touch on what we're going to go over today, we'll talk about ISACA's two newest certifications that can be really helpful if you are trying to pivot into AI or just understand how AI may affect the work that you do. And we'll also talk a little bit about some of the opportunities and risk associated with AI technologies. If you aren't familiar with ISACA, we are a professional membership organization that offers certification. We have professionals ranging from experience. We have people who are relatively new to the career, while others are thinking about retirement in the next few years. And our membership represents people working in audit, security, risk, governance, privacy, and emerging technology. Basically, ISACA professionals care about making trustworthy and reliable technology. We really hope to help guide people no matter where they may be in their career journey. And some of the certifications that we're going to talk about today are for those who are maybe mid-career or a little bit more senior in their career. So I mentioned that ISACA offers several different certifications, but there are two that I would really like for us to focus on just to kind of set the stage for our presentation today. One of them is ISACA's CISA certification, which is Certified Information Systems Auditor, and then our CISM certification, which is aimed at people working in security, specifically security managers. These two certifications have a lot of global recognition. In fact, there are some job applications that require that you have a CISA in order to even apply. We find that, especially in the United States, there is a correlation with relatively high salaries for those who hold these certifications. But we understand that the technology landscape is rapidly evolving, largely because of AI. And so to that end, we have created a new certification called the ISACA Advanced in AI Audit Certification, or AAIA. All right, before we get into the specifics of that certification and who it's for and what exactly it means, let's just talk a little bit about AI, some of the opportunities and the risk associated with it. A lot of organizations have, for many years, been adopting AI-powered tools. It makes sense. They can help optimize workflows, save time, perhaps take away some of the more mundane tasks of your staff. But generative AI tools have just kind of exploded onto the market and been adopted in a way that we really haven't seen with any technology before. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, the overall adoption of AI was faster than the adoption of the internet or of computers. And then according to Reuters, ChatGPT reached 100 million users only 2 months after it launched, which actually made it a record for the fastest growing consumer application. So, given how much people are rushing to adopt this technology and start to play around with it, it's clear that there's a lot of potential that people are seeing in it. But let's also understand that there is risk associated with it as well. There's intentional misuse. Leveraging generative AI tools makes it possible to create multimedia disinformation campaigns. And long gone are those phishing emails of the past with terrible grammar and misspellings. Now, with the tool like ChatGPT or Copilot, it's pretty easy to, in just a few seconds, write a pretty persuasive sounding phishing email. We're also seeing deepfakes, sometimes with really explicit imagery created without people's consent, sometimes celebrities. And dishonesty is also a serious problem that we're seeing. Some people may be leveraging generative AI tools and not being entirely forthright about it. If you're interested in an example of that, the Chicago Sun-Times ran a list of the best books of the summer to read. Unfortunately, almost half of them, perhaps a bit more, were not real. The author of that column used generative AI to write it, didn't think to fact check anything, and unfortunately, he wasn't clear about that. And then there was a massive hallucination that was printed in this paper. But aside from intentional and deliberate misuse, there's also some unintentional harms that could come from adopting AI technology and not thinking about the risk. One of the big ones, and we're starting to see some of this play out in court cases, is privacy and intellectual property. Many models say that they are trained on information publicly available on the internet. Well, that means a lot of things, and often it can include personal or sensitive information. Oftentimes, people have not consented to have their personal information be used to train an AI model, but there isn't necessarily anything they can do to try and remediate that. Additionally, bias is a really big issue, especially with any kind of automated decision making. If you have data sets that are not accurately representative of people or that are not accurately disaggregated based on certain demographics, odds are the outputs that you have are going to reflect the same biases that are within that data set. And then more and more people are starting to look at some of the environmental impacts associated with AI, especially generative AI, and the massive amounts of water that it can consume. Something that in just the last 2 weeks has become a really big topic of conversation is the hype around AI and if we're possibly being a little bit oversold and underdelivered. GPT-5 launched pretty recently and it was touted as having PhD level expertise. But if you've played around with it, you may know that was not the case. Somebody asked GPT-5 to create a list of all of the US presidents from Herbert Hoover onward, including their photos and the years that they were president. The longer you look at it, the funnier it gets. The names are made up, the images are not correct, and some of them served 300 years or negative 300 years in the past. GPT-5 was also asked to make a map of Europe, and as you can see, it was not accurate. To call this PhD level expertise is definitely not true. And so I think people are starting to understand that AI may be a very useful tool, but it doesn't necessarily act as a panacea. It can't solve all of our problems. And I think it's easy when we talk about AI risk to just think about reputational risk or enterprise risk. But we have to understand that AI, when it's not being properly controlled or when people are able to bypass controls, can have serious detrimental harms. So, the Center for Countering Digital Hate recently released a report that was fascinating, basically showing how easy it was to bypass controls built into ChatGPT. So, what they did is they posed as three different 13-year-olds. One 13-year-old was interested in content about self-harm and suicide, one was interested in eating disorder content, and the other was interested in substance abuse. On this slide, you can see just how quickly they were able to bypass ChatGPT's controls, saying, we won't provide you with that information. In fact, in almost all of these situations, the 13-year-old was able to bypass the controls simply by saying, I'm not looking for this information. It's for a report I'm doing in a class. And within 2 minutes, ChatGPT was providing information on how to safely injure oneself. It provided a meal plan for the person who was interested in losing a lot of weight, advocating for a few days of not eating anything and a few days of eating 500 calories, and how to find a way to make sure that their parents didn't catch on to the fact that they weren't eating. These are really serious issues. And so when we talk about what AI might mean for your jobs, it's important to understand not only are you trying to protect your organization. But if you're a deployer of an AI model, you really need to be proactive and think about the ways in which the model you are creating could be abused and potentially create really harmful content for some of the most vulnerable members of our society. So we know that there is potentially harm associated with AI technology. Unfortunately, laws and regulations are lacking. This is actually not really specific to AI. In general, it takes a long time for laws and regulations to go into effect, and technology does move a lot faster. We see some regulations in China and in Europe, and here in the United States, there are some states that are trying to create guardrails around AI and how to safely use it. But one thing that is really important to understand is that there may be laws and regulations that are not aimed at AI, things like the GDPR or HIPAA, that absolutely have an impact on AI systems that you may be using in your organization. So, this is why we think the role of an auditor who has specific expertise in how AI works is so important. They need to be able to understand how things like automated decision making may be impacting your customers or your members. And we find that it's going to be really important for auditors to have a specific understanding of AI functionality. There are some, I think, valid criticisms about a lot of the conversations around AI, saying, well, isn't this somewhat similar to other technologies? And I think in a lot of ways it absolutely is. But I think one of the key differences between AI and some other technologies is this black box operation. Essentially, not understanding how particular inputs have led to a given output or what the possible influences may be on outputs that are biased or causing disproportionate harm to certain groups. And so, given that, auditors have a critical role when it comes to safe, responsible, and honestly effective AI adoption. They're going to have to be able to advise on AI governance and risk. We were talking about the hype around a lot of AI tools previously, and I think auditors are uniquely positioned to help identify what's actually possible, what isn't, and what makes the most sense for that particular organization. So, the role of auditors when it comes to AI at ISACA, we kind of think it's twofold. Yes, there's the auditing AI, but it's also possible that some people might use AI in their audits. Now, a lot of AI tools have actually been used in audits for years. It's not entirely new. Things like data analysis, outlier detection. But there are other possible use cases, even something as small as having Grammarly look over your audit report to make sure everything is going to be clear and easy for somebody who's not technical to understand. I know, and it's totally valid to worry about job displacement and job loss as a result of adopting AI tools. But paradoxically, for audit, I actually think that the role of a human becomes even more important as you begin to adopt more AI-powered tools. But specifically, this needs to be a human who understands the limitations of AI tools while also being able to use them for efficiency as necessary and as appropriate. And so, to that end, ISACA is really excited to announce our Advanced in Artificial Intelligence Audit, or AAIA certification. I know there are a lot of AI related certifications out there on the market right now, but what makes this one really unique is that it is focused specifically on audit. As you can see in the title, it is an advanced certification. So if you're going to pursue this, we are assuming that you have some expertise working in audit. You need to have a CISA certification, that's the one from ISACA, IIA's CIA certification, or the AICPA's CPA certification in order to take this exam and earn this designation. This is largely because our study materials, which are robust, are presuming that you know a lot about audit. We're going to give you a lot more specific guidance on the overlap between AI and audit. However, if you're not at all familiar with audit, this may not be the certification for you. As far as exam preparation goes, we have some online courses, review manuals, and a large, robust question, answer, and explanation database that can help you achieve success on this exam if that is something you decide to pursue. And so if I were to show you where exactly this fits within a career journey, again, it is a bit more for those experienced professionals who may be working in the field, people who have a CISA, CPA, or CIA certification, and are looking to understand how AI might affect their work as an auditor. So that's our newest certification related to audit, but we have something very similar for security. That's our AAISM certification. Before we get into that, let's just talk about AI opportunities and risk, but specifically as they pertain to security. We talked about how a lot of organizations are using AI for a variety of purposes. A McKinsey report found that 72% of respondents to one of their surveys said that their companies implemented AI in at least one business function. So there's clearly a lot of opportunity and potential there. What's interesting is in ISACA's AI Pulse Poll survey, which we conducted last year, 40% of respondents said that they weren't offering any AI training at all. This is highly concerning, not just because of AI, but if you are providing any tool to your employees, it's important you teach them how to use it to make sure you're getting the most out of any investment that you've made, but also to make sure people understand what it is and isn't good to be used for. Additionally, we found some really concerning findings in ISACA's State of Cybersecurity 2024 report. When asked the question, were you or anyone on your team involved in the development, onboarding, or implementation of AI solutions? Nearly half, it was 45%, said no, and another 12% said that it didn't apply to their organization. With AI and just the rapid rate at which generative AI tools have been adopted by a lot of individuals, we start to worry about shadow IT. People may be using generative AI tools on their work computers without talking to security departments or other IT professionals to make sure that it is in fact safe to use for that particular purpose and even that that particular tool is the most appropriate. Additionally, according to that same survey that ISACA conducted last year, when asked were you or anyone on your team involved in the development of a policy governing the use of AI technology in your organization, only 35% said yes. That doesn't necessarily mean that organizations don't have policies around AI, but it might mean that security professionals don't have input as far as shaping the content that goes into this policy, which is highly concerning. One of the hot topics of conversation for the past few months has been agentic AI and the possibilities that it could have. This becomes highly concerning from a security perspective. Agentic AI could execute malicious code. And for somebody who's more of a vibe coder and isn't necessarily aware of all of the sources from which an LLM is pulling in information, that can be quite detrimental, especially if people are using company assets and potentially putting their entire organization and themselves at risk. Something else that's important to understand is that a lot of AI tools are going to continue to train subsequent models based on inputs, especially with generative AI, and this can be really concerning. If staff are putting private information, intellectual property, or trade secrets into a generative AI tool, that could potentially put it in the hands of your competitors. And again, this becomes especially concerning when we look at shadow IT, when your IT department doesn't even know that certain tools may be heavily relied upon by certain individuals in your organization. So, to that end, it becomes really apparent that security professionals have to have a say when it comes to selecting tools that are AI powered, but also developing policies around the use of AI. What's critical is that security managers be really proactive and forward thinking. Understanding the threat landscape, which may shift rapidly, is vital. It's important to understand that there are a lot of great AI powered tools on the market, but they may not necessarily have been built with security and things like privacy in mind. In fact, one CEO of a very popular AI provider said that they can't establish privacy safeguards until problems emerge, which is to say they're not thinking about privacy. They're waiting until a privacy harm happens, and then maybe they'll put controls in place. This needs to be really scary for security managers. They need to understand that the tools alone are likely not configured in a way that's going to protect you, protect your enterprise, and try to prevent harm from happening to anyone who may be impacted by this particular AI system. Now, just to be clear, I think it is absolutely possible to use AI for security in useful ways and to just use other generative AI tools in a secure way. However, security managers really need to have a strong understanding of AI, what exactly it is and what it isn't, if they want to adopt AI tools safely, securely, and responsibly in their organization. And that is where ISACA's AAISM certification comes in. So, comparable to the AAIA certification, this one is really unique in that it's focused specifically on security and AI. This one is also an advanced certification, so in order to earn this designation, you must have the CISM or CISSP certification. But ultimately, we hope that people who have this certification are able to be stakeholders and have a seat at that table when it comes to enterprise conversations around how to safely and responsibly adopt AI tools. The three domains that comprise this particular certification are governance and program management, AI risk management. Again, that piece is so critical when we're thinking about the potential misuse or abuse of AI tools. And then finally, AI technologies and controls. Similar to that previous certification, this is a more advanced certification, and we have a lot of robust prep materials if this is something you are interested in. And so to show you where this may fit in a security career journey, you'll see again, this is an advanced one. We anticipate people are CISM or CISSP holders who have a very solid foundational understanding of what security is. However, they're just looking to understand how exactly AI might impact security and even how AI could help them do their security related tasks a little bit better. So, if either of these certifications sound interesting to you, here are the links for how you can find them. In addition, on ISACA's website, we have, countless resources related to AI. If you're not quite ready to take either of these exams, you want to build some more professional experience, or you're studying for one of the prerequisite exams necessary to apply for these exams, we have a lot of resources available for you as far as webinars, articles, blog posts, white papers that are specific to AI. And so, with that, I think we have time for some questions.
Awesome, Zafia. I will go ahead and give our audience a minute or two to throw any last minute questions or feedback in the chat. But in the meantime, I will go ahead and drop a link here. If you want to learn a little bit more on this topic or find a little bit more about where your career lands in the ISACA certification pathway, you can absolutely learn a little bit more over here. And I will go ahead and drop this link here. But other than that, I believe that is it for us. Awesome. Fantastic. Here we go with the chat. Go ahead and give us another minute or two.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your fantastic info today, Safia. And if anyone in the audience needs any more info on this topic, please do not be afraid to visit us at that link or visit ISACA and all of our training partners. We are so excited to talk a little bit more about AI and the audit of AI. If anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us. But other than that, thank you so much for joining and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.